Halfus Wyrmbreaker is the first fight in the Bastion of Twilight, and is widely regarded as the easiest heroic boss for 10 and 25. Wyrmbreaker only has a few abilities to worry about throughout the fight, the most important of which is Shadow Nova, a 0.5 second cast that deals 40 to 50,000 damage and throws everyone backwards. This is interruptible. Wyrmbreaker attacks incredibly fast and stacks malevolent strikes on his target, causing them to take 8% reduced healing per stack. At 50%, Wyrmbreaker will begin casting an ability called Furious Roar, which will knock everyone down to the ground 3 times, dealing 20,000 damage each time. Wyrmbreaker also has a dragon flying around the air to aid him, called the Proto-Behemoth. The Behemoth cannot be attacked and will cast 2 abilities throughout the fight. Fireball Barrage will cast a continuous chain of fireballs, dealing around 30,000 damage per hit to random members of the raid every second. These fireballs do splash damage, so it's important that people not be within 5 yards of each other throughout the fight. The Behemoth will also cast Scorching Breath, dealing 12,000 damage a second for 8 seconds to the entire raid. He does not cast Fireball Barrage while doing this. Wyrmbreaker enrages 6 minutes after being pulled, making him immune to taunt and ensuring a wipe on the next roar. All of these abilities are impossible to deal with for long without assistance. Around the room are positioned 4 friendly drakes and a group of 8 whelps. When released, these will cast a spell to aid the entire raid by negating some of Wyrmbreaker's abilities. Nether Scion applies Nether Blindness to Wyrmbreaker, increasing his chance to miss, reducing his attack speed and reducing his damage by 25%. This allows malevolent strikes to stack slowly enough that you will be capable of taunting Wyrmbreaker between 2 or 3 tanks without all of them gaining so many stacks as to be unhealable. Stormrider applies Cyclonic Winds to Wyrmbreaker, slowing his casting speed by 500%, making Shadow Nova's cast slow enough to be consistently interrupted. Time Warden applies Time Dilation to the Proto-Behemoth, drastically reducing the speed of fireballs in flight, allowing you to avoid them before they hit you. The Orphan Whelps each apply Atrophic Poison to the Proto-Behemoth, reducing his damage dealt by 750 with each attack, stacking up to 6,000 damage reduction. This makes the Scorching Breath deal half the damage. Slate Dragon applies Stone Touch to Wyrmbreaker, causing him to be stunned periodically for 12 seconds. Each add will also increase the damage Wyrmbreaker takes upon death by applying a stacking debuff called Dragon's Vengeance. For this purpose, the whelps count as 1 drake. A few seconds after being released, however, the drakes or whelps are mind-controlled, leaving their debuffs on the targets, but now attacking the raid and doing large tank damage. Barring Slate Dragon, each of the adds release is essential to dealing with Wyrmbreaker's abilities. However, given that they melee for an average 25,000 damage unmitigated, most groups only release 3 adds immediately, saving the 4th until after the first target is dead. Stormrider and Nether Scion must always be released on start. Without their abilities, your group will not be able to handle healing the tanks or raid. The Emerald Whelps and Time Warden both drastically reduce raid damage, with the Time Warden being the bigger help due to removal of some of the random damage elements the fight has, such as multiple fire barrages hitting your tank as he's being meleeed. However, the Time Warden deals more damage than the Whelps and the breath is still formidable. We suggest releasing only one of these 2 until you have killed or nearly killed your first target. If you have Aura Mastery, Raid Walls and Barriers, these can easily mitigate the damage of the breath, making Time Warden the best option to release. If you have a strong AoE group and can rapidly bring down the whelps, releasing them first may be the way to go. One of your tanks should hold Wyrmbreaker until they reach 7 or 8 stacks, at which point they should be given a Hand of Protection and immediately cancel Aura it. Or if none is available, taunt Nether Scion and have your Scion tank pick up Wyrmbreaker at 5 to 6 stacks. If you do not have a Hand of Protection or Bubble, do not let stacks get to 8. Your remaining tank should be your best geared, as he will be taking the most damage and will need the most attention. He should also be holding Stormrider and Time Warden, or the Whelps, whichever you chose to release. Once you have decided on what you're releasing, assign people to release the mobs on the pool. The debuffs that the drakes apply to Wyrmbreaker are proximity based. This means that the tank that is holding Halfus first should immediately pick him up and take him next to Stormrider as he is released. This is so that the first Shadow Nova is interruptible because he is closer to Stormrider. Make sure you assign someone who is not a tank already doing another task to release Stormrider on the pool and have it misdirected or tricked onto your tank. Have your tank that is tanking Nether Scion release him and bring him across the room rapidly to the stack, making sure not to stand on anyone else once in position. With the recent changes to 10-man, Wyrmbreaker can be interrupted with just one interrupter who has a 12-second or less cooldown. Shamans and DKs are particularly strong options. Be sure to use focus interrupts. Your damage should always be on the drakes until they are dead. In this video, we chose to pull Wyrmbreaker to Stormrider and interrupt the first cast. We have our main tank pull him onto Stormrider and then immediately afterwards position him so that the entire group is stacked up. Once you have executed a successful pull, the entire fight is decided within the first minute. If you have very strong AoE, taking down the whelps first is a great idea. However, in most situations, it's better for your tank's sake to bring down a drake first. Pop Heroism or Lust and take down whichever drake you choose first. For us, we chose Stormrider. Once your first kill mark is at around 10% health, release the Whelps or Time Warden, whichever you chose to release last, to reduce the raid damage. At this point, the entire fight becomes about maintaining the healer's mana until the second drake is dead. If you haven't already, AoE down the Whelps and then focus down Nether Scion or Time Warden, whichever is lower from the AoE. Once you have successfully downed them, the fight is usually won. Finish the remaining drake while continuing to taunt Wyrmbreaker if the tank stacks get above 5. For most compositions, and particularly with the change to Dragon's Vengeance not stacking until an ad is dead, it's generally better for a group to leave Slate Dragon alone for their first kill and to focus the boss. With the 400% increased damage taken, he'll die quickly. Once Wyrmbreaker reaches 50%, he will immediately cast Furious Roar. If you have a mage in your group, they can blink out of the third Furious Roar, allowing them to interrupt the Shadow Nova he casts immediately afterward. You can also have an Orc use a stun reduction meta gem and allow them to safely get the interrupt. Hand of Protection and other immunities, along with the human racial, all stop the stun as well. Most groups will be able to interrupt almost all of the Shadow Novas. If not, use cooldowns on the main tank as he is the most likely one to die during the Shadow Nova. When knocked down by Furious Roar, a player gets a small window of time in which they can move and jump, allowing you to continue avoiding fireballs. This is essential to living, especially if the Shadow Nova isn't going to be interrupted, so pay attention. Light wheels can also be clicked while knocked down. If you find yourself approaching the enrage timer, make sure your 3 tanks are highest on threat. You won't get long after the enrage before Wyrmbreaker gets a Shadow Nova or Roar off, ensuring a wipe. If you find yourself lacking in DPS, consider going to 3 healers if you haven't. This fight should not be much of a DPS problem for a group coming off a Nef kill. Good luck, and check out our site at availedguild.com for details on our guild and more strategy guides.